Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. We are learning Mishnah Yevamos, Perek Dalet, Chapter 4, Mishnah Beis, Mishnah 2. Okay. Now, if you recall from a while ago, we were learning about a case about a person who made chalitza on his sister-in-law, and they came out she was pregnant. Now the Mishnah has like this, a case where he actually performed yibum on her, and it comes out she was pregnant. Now, the halacha is that this person, before he does yibum, should be waiting 3 months before he actually does yibum to make sure to see if she's pregnant or not. After 3 months, you can see if she's pregnant. So the sages said that a person is supposed to wait 3 months before he does yibum. But in the case of our Mishnah, he did not do so. So the Mishnah says, "Hakainas is yivimtai," one who marries his yivama. That means he performed yibum on her. He cohabited with her. V'nimtzes muberes v'yolda, and she comes up being pregnant and she gave birth. Now, in this case of the Mishnah, we don't have a question about whose child it is. It happened. Everything happened early enough that we don't have any questions whose child it is. We know it's the first. We know it's the first husband's child, but it comes out that she was pregnant. So we say like this: Bizman shahavalad shal kayama. If the child is viable, remember we spoke about sometimes if a child is born, the child's not considered depending on when it's born. And for instance, we'll see soon. But if the child is a viable child, it's born after 9 months. The child is fine. Even for a short time, it could have died shortly afterwards. But if it lived after 9 months, or if it lived for a month after being born early, so that means it's considered a viable child. So then it comes out that the brother had a child. The brother had children, and there was no mitzvah of yibum to be done at all. So the Mishnah says, so what happens then? Yaitzi, that means he sends her out. They don't remain married anymore. V'chayavim b'karban, brother obligated to bring a sacrifice. Which sacrifice should I have to bring? A carbon chatas, to bring a sin offering. Anytime you unintentionally transgress the type of prohibition that if done intentionally would carry the punishment of karis, of one's neshama being cut off, then if you do that accidentally or unintentionally, you bring a carbon chatas. Now in this case, it was done unintentionally, right? He didn't know she was pregnant. Maybe he jumped the gun, but he didn't know she was pregnant. So it was done intentionally. So both of them, it really comes out, both of them cohabit in a way that they were absolutely forbidden. I mean, she's an erva. If she has a child from the first husband, then she's an Eishes Achshla B'Maka Mitzvah. Your sister-in-law, where there's no mitzvah of yibum, she's a 100% erva. So in that situation, if they unintentionally cohabited, they bring a chatas. That's what happens here. Chayav and carbon. They both have to bring the carbon. Both he and her have to bring the carbon because they unintentionally sinned. All right. Now, but it says yaitzi, which means that he sends her out. Does he give her a get?
No.
The answer is no, because since it comes out she was an erva, since she was his brother's wife, where there's no mitzvah of yibum, she's an erva. Where there's an erva, there's no kedushin, there's no marriage. So therefore, it was nothing. I mean, it was an act of cohabitation, nothing more. And therefore, it was a forbidden act. It was done intentionally. You got to bring a carbon chatas, got to bring a sin offering. But other than that, she just goes. Now, let's say the child is not viable. Say it's a stillborn. Okay, then that's not a viable child. It's stillborn. So then what happens then? Chaim, he keeps her. It comes out then that the child, she may become pregnant from him, but there was no child born from him. And therefore there is a mitzvah of yibum here. And he did the mitzvah of yibum. And therefore he sticks with her. Because it comes out now now it's clear to us there was a mitzvah of yibum to be done. He did it, and they're married. Safek ben Tisha Larishan, Safek ben Shiva La'achrein. Let's say the case is that we do not know she's pregnant, and we do not know was this child a 9-month child from the first husband or a 7-month child from the second husband. The Mishnah always works with, nowadays it doesn't necessarily work the same, but the Mishnah always works with either a 9-month pregnancy or a 7-month pregnancy. A 7-month pregnancy is considered early, but it's viable. So therefore, he says like this. In this situation, he performed Yibum 2 months after his brother died. Okay? She gave birth 7 months later. Right? He didn't wait the 3 months, but he did it at 2 months. So now, when she gives birth 7 months later, we don't know whose child is it. Is it a 9-month child from the first husband, or is it a 7-month child from the second husband? And therefore, we don't know whose child it is. If we don't know whose child it is, we don't know, what happened here. So the Mishnah says like this: Safek ben Tisha Larisha Safek ben Shibla Achrei. If we have a doubt, is this child a 9-month child from the first husband or a 7-month child from the second husband? Yaitzi, he has to divorce her. Now, in this case, the question is, again, if this is the child of the first husband, then she was an erva. But maybe the child was a child of the second husband, and maybe it's his child, and maybe it's a full yibum, and they're actually married. But we don't know, right? We don't know. He can't stay married to her because she may be an erva. But he can't just let her go free because maybe it was not the first husband's child, it was his child. There really was a yibum. The yibum was done. So he's got to give her a get. You got to give her a get out of doubt. In case he can't stay married to her because we don't know her status. But in case she was married to him, he can't just let her go free. So in this case, he can't stay married to her. He has to send her away, but he's got to do it again. Now, what status does the child have? What status does this child have?
It could be a mamzer.
No, he's not. Absolutely not. Says the Mishnah. V'havalad kosher. And the child is kosher. Manavshach, as we say. Either way, if it's the first husband's child, then they were married 100%. If it's the second husband's child, they were also married 100%. It was Yibum. So there's nothing wrong with the child. The child's not a mamzer. The child was not born from a forbidden marriage. Either way, he's either the first husband's child or the second one. One or the other, it's still going to be kosher. So the child's not a mamzer. V'chayavin ba'asham tali. And now the carbon that they have to bring, now again, they may have sinned here, right? But we don't know. We don't even know. It's definitely unintentional, but we don't even know if they sinned unintentionally. And when that happens, the carbon you bring is called an asham tali, which means it's an asham that's kind of hanging. We don't know what the status exactly is of this person. Did he really sin? Did he not sin? So when that happens regarding a prohibition that carries a punishment of kares, if done intentionally, but you don't know if it was transgressed or not, then the halacha is that one brings what's called an asham tali, a guilt offering that, again, is based on a doubt as to whether you transgressed or not. So in this case, if there was no mitzvah of even because the child is a child of the first husband, then she was an erva. But maybe she wasn't an erva. Maybe it's a child of the second husband, and therefore they didn't do anything wrong. In that situation, the carbon that you bring is not a carbon chatas, a sin offering, but called an asham tali. It's an asham that's brought for a situation where you have a question whether you transgressed or not. And again, this is only a question if it's done unintentionally, not if it's done intentionally. Okay. So the Chofetz Chaim began discussing the prohibition about accepting, believing the lashon hara that you hear. And now he says, "Afal shmias lashon hara levad gam ken yesh isur min haTorah." Even just to listen to lashon hara alone, the Torah forbids. After be'es hashmiya in bedatu lekabel sadavar, kemishamato azne l'shmaya. Let's say you guys going to tell you lashon hara, and you say, "I will not believe it. I'm not going to believe it. Not going to believe it." Still, it's still forbidden for you to listen to it. There are many ways that the prohibition about listening to the lashon hara and the prohibition about accepting lashon hara, there are many differences. So one example is the b'shmiya ein iser rak min adavar nagei loy al haba. Aval adavar nagei loy al haba im emesu kegoin shehu mevin mitchilas hasipur shu reitz al aroisa b'sipur ech sheplein ish meheman u'chay gavna. Saying like this, when it comes to listening to lashon hara, listening to what a person says, if you get a sense from when this person comes over to you that he wants to let you know a piece of information that you need to know, you wanted to go into a business venture with someone, and somebody comes over to tell you this guy's a crook. This guy's a crook. Can you listen to it? You certainly can. Because if you already know, or you sense at least, that this is something that's relevant to you, then you can listen to it. Okay? Now, nonetheless, the came in the Mashu Reitz Lishmai and Kvanos Lishmai Ganusa Shal Chaver Rak or Reitz Latzas Atzmai Shal Yavar Kakli Hazek Lematzam Riva. Okay, the reason there's no problem listening to it is because not listening in order to put the guy down. He's listening to in order to protect himself. Okay. Now, then he says the same thing of, let's say the reason is why you want to hear about it may not be relevant to you, but it's relevant to somebody else. Maybe he's telling you this guy's a crook, and he's telling it to you because you can help the person that he's hurting. Okay, in that situation, we say you can hear it. Aval says the Chofetz Chaim, lekabel dahainu lahachler adavar b'libo shu emes asar b'chol gavnei. If you listen to lashon hara, that's considered that you're allowed to listen to because you're allowed to use it to protect yourself. You're not allowed to believe it though. Can't believe it. You can take it into consideration, and you can act upon it and act upon it in the appropriate way. So if somebody says, don't go into the business, the guy's a crook, you cannot believe he's a crook. But you can say, hey, he may be a crook, and therefore I'm staying away. Or somebody says, this guy cheated that person. Maybe I'll check it out and I'll see what's there to do about it. But you can't accept it. So the first difference that he's saying here between the prohibition of listening to lashon hara and accepting lashon hara is there are times where you may listen to lashon hara, but you can never accept it. Or should I say never. In these situations where you're able to listen to it because it's for your benefit, you're still not allowed to believe it as a fact. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, going back to this Mishna with David HaMelech and Bathsheba.